Ever wonder what led the United States into one of the most controversial conflicts in its history, the Vietnam War? It all began with the French Indochina War, a bitter struggle from 1946 to 1954, where Vietnam fought for its independence from French colonial rule. This conflict culminated in the historic Geneva Conference in 1954, where the world's powers gathered to negotiate a settlement. The result? Vietnam was divided at the 17th parallel, with the North under communist control and the South under a pro-Western regime. The United States, gripped by Cold War fears, saw this as a potential domino effect, where if one country fell to communism, others in the region would follow. This theory, known as the domino theory, was the driving force behind US involvement in Vietnam. The stage was set for what would become a long, brutal conflict that would test the mettle of the United States. The war escalated swiftly, didn't it? It was in 1964 when the Gulf of Tonkin incident unfolded. North Vietnamese patrol boats allegedly attacked US destroyers. This incident, real or not, gave President Lyndon B. Johnson the ammunition he needed to rally Congress and the American public. He retaliated, marking a significant escalation in the US's involvement in the war. 1965 saw the deployment of ground troops. Thousands of young Americans were sent to the jungles of Vietnam. Their mission? To wear down the enemy. The US military employed a strategy of attrition, hoping to deplete the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces to the point of surrender. But the Vietnamese were resilient, and the war dragged on. As the war progressed, it became increasingly unpopular at home and abroad. The American public began to question the cost of a war that seemed to have no end in sight. But what was the turning point in this drawn-out conflict, you might ask? The answer lies in the tumultuous year of 1968, during an event known as the Tet Offensive. This was a massive surprise attack launched by the North Vietnamese and Viet Cong forces, catching the US and South Vietnamese by surprise during the Lunar New Year celebrations. The Tet Offensive was not just a military operation, it was a psychological warfare that greatly influenced public opinion. It was this event that marked a significant turning point in the war, shifting the balance and the perception of who was winning. Despite the heavy losses on the Vietnamese side, the offensive heightened anti-war sentiment in the US, leading to widespread protests and questioning of government policy. It was a stark reminder of the brutal realities of war, far removed from the sanitized versions presented on television screens. The Tet Offensive shook the nation's faith in its leadership in the war effort. So, how did the United States finally extract itself from this quagmire, you might ask? Well, it all boils down to the Paris Peace Accords in 1973. This agreement, brokered after extensive negotiations, led to a ceasefire and the gradual withdrawal of US troops. This marked the beginning of the end of US involvement in Vietnam. However, peace was still a distant dream for Vietnam. In 1975, the world watched as Saigon, the capital of South Vietnam, fell to the North Vietnamese forces. This marked the end of the war and the reunification of Vietnam under communist rule. The once vibrant city was no more, a poignant symbol of the futility and devastation of war. The Vietnam War, a complex and controversial chapter in American history, left indelible scars on both nations and continues to influence US foreign policy today. This conflict serves as a stark reminder of the human cost of war and the delicate balance of global politics.